Welcome, everybody. We are so excited to be here today. I am so happy to be hanging out with the two of you, Matt and Jonathan. Thank you again for making time for us. Let's hear it one more time for the boys. So today we are going to dive into the series, of course. We're going to show a couple clips, we're going to do a little fan Q&A, and we're going to just have some fun and talk about something that means so much to so many people. I don't want to waste a second. I want to dive right in. Your performances in this series are so beautiful. They're so powerful and mesmerizing. I was watching this series with my husband, like ripping the couch the entire time. I just couldn't believe the art that we were so lucky to watch. For the two of you, how did playing these characters change or affect your sense of self and identity as two gay men? We're going hard first.
Yes.
Yep. There you go. You want to go?
Yeah, go.
I would just say the way Hawk sort of raged against the machine was so inspiring to me. The way he found his own personal freedoms within a society and a world that told him he didn't deserve them, he shouldn't have them. And the sad thing is that the cost of all that for him was the loss of love. So I think of real true intimacy openly. That he doesn't really get to start a really authentic life until he's 65. But I think there's something about his intelligence and way of kind of working the system in a way to find his own personal freedoms that was inspiring to me, and also certain aspects of his life that made me very grateful for all that we have living in the times we live in, and because of people like that who fought in their own way to give us these rights today.
Yeah, there's so much I think that there's so much that you think you're going to find out purely on the basis of being able to tell a story like this, which obviously I haven't seen before. And the invitation to go back to the 50s and work your way through to the 80s and to see the sort of evolution of queer culture in that time and the queer experience in America through the eyes of Hawk and obviously Tim as well. And I think I came away with so much more than I thought possible, which I think is what the way that I definitely am changed is understanding exactly how you refer to it as a piece of art. I think when something is that profound in the experience of making it and you're following, Matt's footsteps and being there to support him, and Ron as well, and Robbie Rogers who produced it, I just felt like it's spoiled me, and possibly I won't speak for Matt, but for in the future, because you just think it might never be that rich again. And there's so much about Tim, obviously, that in his spirit and the resilience of both these characters and their choices that they make. They're in, it's like a pas de deux over like 35 years, and there's no right or wrong. There's no right or wrong choice when you're experiencing that level of oppression and constant, crushing of spirit. So to be able to say goodbye to the story and to realize in the world that we're living in now, but also to experience that, I think unlocked in me, I think some sort of courage or a sense of self and a sense of confidence, actually, which I didn't really have before, I don't think, in that specific way.
And emotionally, both of your characters deal with such interesting things. I mean, for you, Matt, you're playing a very repressed man. And I imagine that's very different than who you are, right? And for you, Jonathan, you're playing someone dying of AIDS. And that's something that you're not familiar with. And you have to go to these places that emotionally just cuts you open and you put it all out there. So how did playing your respective characters affect you in that sense?
Well, in terms of playing it, I would say it was kind of like a flip. It was the opposite of what you usually do. Normally, a character's shadow or the darker aspects of themselves are what they conceal and hide from others, and they sort of lead with their love and vulnerability and best face forward. And Hawk was sort of the inverse of that because of circumstances in his life between his father and his family life and the platoon he lost. He's so his intimacy, his love, the sweeter aspects of himself are actually his shadow self. And he leads with a much more assertive, controlled, measured manner. So it was sort of the inverse of how I usually approach a character, which was really liberating and fun and new for me.
Yeah, and also, also with Matt, like, you know, because you read the script and there's obviously so much on the page, but what I remember now that, you know, it's amazing that we can talk about Fellow Travelers again with a bit more, you know, in hindsight, but the level of, like, you just are so aware of what Hawke is feeling at every point, and there's no doubt that his love is there for so many things, and I just think that, yeah, it's a performance that I just think completely smashes it out, you know. Anyway.
And for you emotionally, like, how did you go there? How did you get there and play someone so sick so authentically when you haven't walked in those shoes before, but you handled it with such care and such respect?
Well, I think that's the pressure that I felt going into it is the need to pay respects to so many people that came before us, and there's something that happens when, I suppose, you know. The San Francisco ward scenes, which were obviously in episode 8, there was a day where it fell on World AIDS Day, and I think it started with a scene with Alison Williams, amazing, and the scene where she comes to visit Tim, and then we ended up with, you know, going through all of those scenes with Hawke, and I think what was amazing about this particularly is that everyone who was surrounding it, everyone who sort of was designing it had, and so many people do have uncles and brothers and loved ones that they'd lost or that were living with AIDS or they had looked after their, you know, you go into makeup in the morning and I remember Jordan vividly talking about caring for 3 of his friends, staying, you know, sleeping on the floor of their bedrooms at night. And it was just so real that at times it was actually, you know, obviously overwhelming, but as it should be, because I think that exactly is why Ron wanted to write this story. It's why he took from the book and expanded into the 80s. And I think that was what I was found fascinating, especially telling the story of the AIDS and the ACT UP, you know, when they come up at the end, is that you realise there is a, you know, it's joining the dots back to the 50s and about how, you know, the queer community is dropped at various times in history, and it all stems back from sort of horrendous sort of narratives that are spun in fear-mongering. And so it's sort of, I don't know, it felt emotional and upsetting, and but never for a second not energizing, and it brought a joy because it felt that, I don't know, there were some sort of angels surrounding it.
I felt every decade helped. Like, I felt like the texture of the air between us changed a little bit, and I think that was a testament to the respect and the love you brought to the work and every time period, especially the 80s, and our production designer and a crew who was so respectful of the material. It was like there was like a real tone on set of respect for the work, for the material, and for the generation that we lost, and all the people whose stories we were taking part in. And you felt like this sense that, like, there were just these voices that kind of wanted to come through the story, because there were so many obstacles we hit over the course of pre-production and production, and while we were filming and putting it out and all these things, and then we put it out and then there was a strike, but something just wanted to come through in this story. And all these things that seemed like obstacles ended up being just kind of launching pads for us that helped us out in the end.
And also, it was like incredibly, I mean, it doesn't sound it, but it was incredibly fun as well to make. And,
it really was.
But and I think what I do really, when I say we've been spoiled, it's like I really do understand now what, like, representation means in terms of when you do turn up and you're opposite an actor who, without having to say it, you're looking at each other in these scenes going, this is what we've hoped and wished and thought that, you know, we're missing, and everyone is that sort of level of focus that meant that everyone was so respectful of it, but everyone just like lent in, and those days were long, but with Noah and Jelani as well. It's the love story, I think, in Fellow Travelers that isn't talked about as much is the one of friendship, particularly, where, they end up together in the 80s and Marcus and Frankie going to the West Coast and Tim following them. And I think that's something that I have taken away from Fellow Travelers, like what it actually means to be on a set where you're not, obviously as a white gay man, you're still at the peak of privilege on the pride flag, but it made such a difference to not have to filter anything. Or there was so much energy gained from not having to having a shorthand that was an emotional tapestry, but it's also hilarious. And I think that's the sort of energy that I found, in that I was like, I get it now. I've always understood. Yeah, what allyship? I don't know. So there's something magical about it.
Yeah, there was a real aspect of found family too, and I feel like that bled over into the cast as well. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's one of the many reasons why this series is so magical. You watch it and every character feels so connected to one another. I mean, the two of you, it's not easy to play a love story over 4 decades, like, let alone in one movie or one show and over one time period. That's challenging enough to make it really believable and honest and authentic. To play that over 4 decades is a testament to the work that you two have done to really connect with one another. And it's obvious. I mean, even in the green room backstage, I'm like, these guys are like brothers to each other. Like, it's so fun to see that relationship translate, from on screen to off screen. I'm curious to know, there are so many powerful scenes throughout the series. I can think of 5 right now at the top of my head. But if you had one scene that you think will forever stay with you, like in 30, 40 years, you'll say that scene. Yeah. What would it be?
I've started everyone. You got to do this one.
It's terrible. Oh. There's so many different ways in which you could answer that question. I'll start with the lowest common denominator, which is... No, I feel terrible. Do you know what I will say?
Please.
I will never forget the Fire Island.
What about Fire Island?
Well, there is a lot in Fire Island that I'll never forget, but I do remember. Obviously, it's so important to the story, so we mustn't laugh. But obviously the Garden of Eden sequence. And it was amazing because obviously you had to show the cruising area, the what's it
Dick
called?
Doc.
The Dick.
Meat rack. Thank you.
Meat rack.
Meat rack, Dick Doc.
Y'all, I did not know we were going in this direction, but here we are.
We're all friends here, it's all right. And they had amazing actors that came on to recreate it, and there was just one shot where I think we just, obviously it was just like I got nervous giggles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that I will remember, but also there's other really important.
I think every time we entered a new decade together, that first scene we got, I have so many, there's too many to just bring it down to one. But every time I got to see what Johnny was doing with the character in a new decade and the temperature change and kind of seeing the history of the character that he was bringing in the time period since the last time I'd seen him, and was always so revelatory to me, and just getting to be present with that and work off of that was so, I don't know, it's just really memorable to me. I'll never forget the first day we were in the 70s, the first day we were in the 60s, the first day we were in the 80s. It's all kind of seared into me, and it was just such a partnership from the get-go, and it was always like a yes and getting to see that, and then trying to bring what I was trying to bring, and then feed off that and make it present and make it happen when they were filming. And we never talked about it very much. We kind of just tried to make it happen when the scenes were happening. There was another one, obviously the last scene of the show, no one had told me that we were going to have real patches of the AIDS quilt. And it was one of those moments where I was just leveled, just walking onto that set. And then you have to just get out of your way as an actor and let it all come through and trust this history that we'd created of 35 years together. and it was one of the last things we filmed. And just walking and looking at those squares and seeing the real Roy Cohn square, and it was just, I mean, how could you ever forget a moment like that? It was beyond moving and a profound gift to get to even be in the same frame as the AIDS quilt. So,
yeah, that scene was unbelievable. It was one of the most powerful scenes of the series for sure. And what a gift to be able to be a part of that and to honor so many people in the way that the both of you did.
And there's a big initiative to have the AIDS quilt displayed permanently, which I think everyone should get behind.
Yeah, beautiful. You know, there's a lot of scenes that I think are more obvious that stand out, but there's also, to me, scenes that are smaller that stand out in different ways. And we have a clip of one. The clip is Hawk and Tim sleeping, if my friends can get that one ready. And we're going to watch it, and then I want to talk about it for a minute because I think it's very relatable. So the clip I was talking about, we are going to play. This was a different one, but I'm glad we have it. I'm like, okay.
I was like, when you said it was relatable, I was...
But it is a clip I also picked because I do love how we so clearly see who both of these characters are in this moment. Talk to me about what playing each of them in this scene meant to you.
Well, you do see them, I suppose, at their absolute, at their polar opposites. I mean, it's so painful, isn't it, for Tim clearly does believe in God and he believes in many things and he's confused by it. And to be opening your heart to someone who is shutting you out and then, taking the piss out of, is painful. Like, it's hard for Tim, but also I think what's so brilliant about Hawk, his survival technique is to go hunk and then to shut down, and I think that's also exactly what gives their relationship momentum, as we know, sort of in sort of cyclical relationships, I guess. But yeah, what do you think?
Oh, we filmed that at 4:00 in the morning. Do you remember? It was the last thing we filmed that night. I think it's a scene that really encapsulates the obstacle of their relationship. It sort of is all-encompassing in terms of what they're both struggling with. And what they can express, what they won't express, what they should be able to express, but what they can't for one reason or another, whether that's self-imposed or societally imposed, and the real boundaries around Hawk's heart that are, even though he does have tremendous feelings, preventing them from being able to, have the love they should have, but also ultimately, I don't know, maybe a decision that keeps them both safer in the long run. Who knows, at that time, at the height of the Lavender scare in DC.
I suppose also Tim has never felt that pure, he talks about the love that he feels as pure as anything that he's felt in prayer. And so I think what's so confusing and so amazing about that experience for him, which I hope we can relate to, is just that once you've fallen for someone, there's nothing that should get in the way of that. And obviously Hawk has got so much life experience and he knows how to survive, and Tim doesn't.
Yeah, I think it really set up your relationship, and like you said, that kind of dynamic that we see throughout the course of it. And to your point, I mean, it was protection in a way, right? I mean, you could literally be...
I think that's how Hawk qualifies it for himself, for sure.
Yeah. And to play that so stoically and so powerfully, I think really resonated in that moment that maybe there is something we can't see behind that, right? Maybe it is about protection and safety. I do want to play the Hawk and Tim sleeping clip if we have it. Because I think it's a really interesting moment. That scene, to me, so little is said, but so much is said. And I don't know how many people in the audience today who are part of the community feel this way, but for me, I know there were moments where I felt like I had to sneak around and be ashamed and hide who I was for fear of what someone might think, for fear of being outed. And seeing the two of you in that moment, feeling that so vividly, like, it broke my heart. And it's not such an obvious emotional scene, but it really broke my heart. Did you feel that? Did you have that kind of same experience shooting it?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so sad. anyone has to live like that. But the stakes are so present, aren't they? The security and the safety that they afford each other, and so they sort of hold each other in a really beautiful way when they're allowed to and they're given space to. And then the difference between a door and what that means for these people at that point, especially. But yeah, it's unfortunately it's a panic and an anxiety that I think we're all born with. I hope that changes. But so it is sad to play, but it's easily accessed.
Yeah, sadly. I mean, it's. I feel like it was an undertone throughout the entire series. This sense of longing and inability to express everything that needed to be expressed to really, have a full relationship that's open to the world. And there's something that's bifurcated in that, I think. And I don't know. For me, it was like I could relate to it, certainly growing up in Texas and figuring out my own identity and playing a game that felt like it was high stakes to me at the time to just survive and get to New York City. So yeah, I think it was an undertone throughout the whole show, but something really anyone from our community can relate to on some level. So.
And specifically at that time, I suppose, as well. Just the fact that a neighbor and even a dog could be the thing that, ends your career, like loses you your family. It's wild, and it's such a beautiful, Ron is such an incredible craftsman of moments to go from that, the most serene, like innocence of their love to the reality of the world outside. I think is just brilliant. And therefore I always think in those moments of shock and duality where you're suddenly exposed to something as an audience, emotion can really, and that's what I think he really understands as well in storytelling. Yeah,
it's unexpected. I also feel like anytime we got to be supine, we were so excited because we were so tired because it was such a long filming schedule. I was like, you look so beatific when you're sleeping in that. I'm like, he was probably so happy that he got to lay down for like 15 minutes.
Do the two of you have a favorite decade that you got to play?
Yeah, they're all so good. Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you're talking about moments, do you really remember? But I remember a lot about the first scene when Tim comes back with information about the executive order. That was quite late. That was another night shoot. But I remember really then, it felt to me that it was so, like it was the moment where we were going, I don't know how to say it. I'm so bad at talking about process, but it felt like, if you imagine putting up a tent, it was like we'd chosen the spot we were going to put our tent up. And then it was like, watching each other hammer down the guy ropes. Mm-hmm. And it felt like what happened in that scene created the sort of canvas by which then you'd grow. Anyway, but then I feel like there were linchpin scenes in every decade that followed. I really remember another, and they seem to always be perilous night shoots, but in episode 7 in Fire Island, going back to my favourite moment. No, this is a different moment in episode 7, but the late night conversation where Tim reveals that he's actually seeing someone in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And there was something, and then anyway, I can't.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Yeah, they all really did resonate in a different way, and there were times I was always kind of excited to get this, like I'd spoken about, get to see what the next decade was going to be like and what people were bringing, and Johnny and Allison and Jelani and Noah all brought such nuance to the performances in each decade. It was just such a joy to get to watch and take in and play opposite. And there were different, I think there was something really nice about the Bacchanalian freedom of Fire Island, even though Hawk was like harboring that really tragic secret the whole episode. Like, we'd been so buttoned up in the 50s for 3 episodes straight, and it was so repressed and bottled up, and every director had been like, you are not allowed to emote, you hold it all in, you don't give anything away, you are cold, you are the best poker player. And then getting to just kind of let some of that go and suddenly be in short shorts on the beach with you, I was like, what is happening right now? I don't know, but I love it. And so that was kind of a special moment to get to have.
It was your volcanic shimmy. been brewing. But that was also because similarly in episode 6 as well. Do you remember the scene around the fireplace? I was thinking about this week about it was about what I mean is that the relationship to their to the assumed intimacy that happens, and especially in episode 6 where Tim at that point is he's with Father Lawrence and he's been in seminary and he's burning, it's so sort of devout at that point. And there were these key moments where it's like, how do they address each other physically? Do you remember?
Yes, I do remember.
I remember that was when people ask about whether we talked about scenes, and I feel like we didn't really until that was one where we took ourselves off and we were like, actually, what is this? And it was the bit where he, is hugging Tim and Tim is trying to pull away.
Yeah.
And I feel that sort of intimacy was also in the scene that I was talking about in episode 7, or where it's like, and I thought that was just so interesting and sometimes really, so complicated because you have to sort of team up and actually.
We did. And it's when you're so grateful to have a scene partner like Johnny who makes you better and inspires you to do better and be better every day, because we would sidebar and we would we'd go, okay, we'd block this scene and we'd be like, okay, we have like a loose idea what this is, but like, now let's really talk about what's really going on. Like, what would be this being, what if we tried this? And then just let it come to life when they call to action. But I feel like some of those sidebar moments we have were really, and this is Ron's writing won the day for everyone involved in this project, but they were really integral to some of the moments with our characters.
Totally, and it's because of his detail that there were so many different ways, but there's just the nuance. It's incredible, isn't it? Because it's like if you're dancing with someone and you can freestyle and like you can, come together in freestyle, but then to actually have a choreographed moment where you both can really just go, hang on, what we say, what are we saying together? And what we're saying as actors about what we think these gay men will be experiencing, or these humans.
Yeah.
I'm
just
trying
to
to
lose sense of the 8 count too, and just find the freedom in it,
Yeah.
We have so many dance metaphors.
We're here for it. We're here for them all. Keep them coming. There's so many scenes, as you mentioned, that are very, intimate and close, and you have to have so much trust with one another. So what is it about one another that makes you feel safe? Because you're really putting your full self into each other's hands.
Kindness.
Literally and figuratively, yeah.
Sense of humor.
Yeah, honestly,
it would have been awful if...
I think it's just who Johnny is from the first time we met and we sat down at that coffee shop, which we've talked about ad nauseum, I'm sorry. Goldstruck Coffee on Cumberland Avenue. Loud shout outs to you in Toronto. And we just decided like we were going to have each other's back. And I think we both come from the theater initially, and we have like a sense of what that process is. And, in theater, when you're in that rehearsal room, you have to have each other, you have to really take some bold risks and have each other's back and be willing to get ugly and fail and have bad takes and do things that aren't right. And I just always had that sense from him. And I feel like the intimacy on the show was so well written. That, and I've said this before, but the characters were never the same after an intimacy scene as they were before. And to me, that's the mark of a really good intimacy scene that's integral to the story. And it was the most I've ever been, first of all, I think it's one of the first times I've not really dissociated when I've been in intimacy scenes, because it felt like an acting scene to me, because what they were doing was such a reflection of both of their reactions to an oppressive society. Hawk's raging against it and need for control, and Tim, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but being more willing to let go and be open to things, and the way they had this therapeutic way of coming together that for Hawk, especially, it felt like it was the freest he ever was in the 50s.
Yeah. I think I appreciate that answer, and I think that it's really rewarding to see that off-screen relationship, as I mentioned earlier. It's so clear, it's there, and that's what part of the magic is with this series. You really feel it.
Yeah, and also I think with Matt as well, you have to remember that he was there from the get-go, and you were there in the pitch meetings. Ron and Robbie invited you on board, and so from my experience, Matt was I spoke to Ron first, but we had a screen test, and in terms of leadership, you don't get better really than Matt, because there's no sense of hierarchy, but it was just an ever-present sort of sensitivity and kindness. But with that, I don't mean it was just always really fun, and the work was you led with such a bright light, and I think that really allows everyone to have an amazing time, and you need that in a leader of a series like this.
It was really Ron, you know.
You can't take it.
No, I'll tell you why. Because I was so, and I've talked about this too. I'm sorry. I was cynical about this initially. I was not cynical. I was doubtful, and I was trying to protect my own heart because I loved the story so much. I was trying to protect myself from the disappointment of it not going. But the first time I read one of Ron's scripts, I thought, well, they're going to make this show. Like, it's really going to happen, because his writing was just, it was undeniable. And he was there for pretty much every take of every scene we did. And I looked to him. And when I was, exhausted on hour 60 whatever of the week, I looked to Ron, and this guy who was just like, you could see this was his baby, and you needed to treat it as such. It was so inspiring to see.
Right, and also you can make big swings when you've got someone like Ron, like just completely looking out for you and it. And my gosh, does he love the characters?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even sure it's possible more than us, but he does. And I remember on Fire Island when we'd done 3 episodes in the 50s, and I do remember that was the one time I sat by the pool outside, and I'd gotten my tash on, and I was like, oh, "Is this gonna?" I'm nervous. How do you stitch? How do you carry the spirit forward of? And he just said, Johnny, he said, you do your thing, but he's like, I've got the story, I've got it in my, and I will construct. And it really is true that it's his construction of that story, in the writing of it, in the conception of it, but in also the day-to-day filming of it, and then the edit. There's so much, and also there were so many details as well, interestingly, that weren't involved in the final story, which just shows how much of a wealth there is in his brain about these. And I have no idea how you do that. But it felt like, having watched the Olympics a couple of weeks ago, it's like having one of those spotters when you're doing the gymnastics, and you just know you're going to get caught. So why not go for the Simone Biles number 3?
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, you mentioned feeling a little...
I'm sorry, I'm still over Simone Biles number 3. Go ahead.
We love Simone Biles. We love a Simone Biles moment.
She's from my hometown, Spring, Texas.
Is she really?
Yeah.
All right. I want to pick up on what you just said, though, for a minute. You felt a little almost cynical in the beginning that this wouldn't actually happen, right? Did you think that the world maybe wouldn't be ready for a story like this? Did you have that fear?
Again, it's my fault, but I feel like maybe cynical is the wrong word. Doubtful might be more accurate. And again, I was self-protecting, admittedly, but I thought, okay, I knew how much money it would take to make a period piece. And I thought, are they really going to put the money into all this? And are they really going to let it be an LGBTQIA plus love story? And then are they going to let members of our community actually be at the creative helm of that story? Like, I couldn't recall seeing a lot of things out there in the world like that. So I was just doubtful. But, we were so blessed to be at Showtime and ultimately Paramount Plus and Fremantle, because when you're developing things, a lot of times you get these really restrictive notes like, oh, yeah, don't do that. That's going to alienate this part of the audience. Don't do that. Women aren't going to like that. Or, you get those kinds of notes. And they were the polar opposite. They were like, go farther. Embarrass yourself, push yourself, scare yourself. We dare you to push this as far as you can. We were like, what? And so I feel like that sense of permission like bled all the way over into our work as actors as well, or we could just jump off a cliff. And I knew Johnny would catch me, and if it was, or Ron would edit it out or whatever we'd have to do, he could spot me like Simone. But yeah, it all did. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I was so moved and inspired by the fact that we had people who weren't all members of our community, who were there with the power, with the decision-making capability to say, no, we believe in you. Go further. Tell your story to the furthest extent that you can. Yeah. And that obliterated every amount of cynicism I ever had, honestly.
Well, to be a part of a show that not only is credited with saving people's lives, literally. There's so many stories of people who write about that, to also healing families and relationships. To your point, it's not just for people in the community. It's literally healing a world of people through your work, which I think is a huge testament. And thank God this series was made. Am I right? Thank God. Thank God. All right, boys, we got some fan questions up in here. Are you ready for them?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not responsible for anything that's about to come out of my mouth.
I love it.
Peter H., thank you for your question. What is something in today's world that you wish your characters would be able to see or experience? P.S. Congrats on the Emmy nominations.
Tim would be living his best life.
Yeah, God, he would. Yeah, I mean, he would be so proud of bits of how communities progressed. My goodness, what a question. I mean, God, there's so much. I mean, there's so much. I mean, the fact that I think for him it would be about education and about the inclusion of queerness and gayness in schools, I think, which I know, we still have in the UK, but I think he'd be incredibly proud. I mean, there's such an earnest response, but yeah, I think he would just love gay marriage and just be able to, and to be able to be with. He loved so fiercely, and I think he would have wanted to stand by someone and to be able to let go of all that shame. I think, and he would have done as well.
I would love to see a photo album of him at just a bunch of different weddings, like enjoying it all.
Too much.
Totally. Okay, I'm gonna go the Ernest route too. I would say, not that was beautiful, he said. I'm just saying, I'm not gonna try to make people laugh. I would say it would be so beautiful for Hawk to get to see a world where he could have everything that he thought he needed to sacrifice everything to have, but also not have to sacrifice any of that to have it. Does that make sense? A world where he could have the job in the government, have the life in Italy, also have the love of his life, and also not have to feel like just kissing him in public wasn't a completely revolutionary act.
Beautifully said. All right, Laura's up next. Matt, what was your favorite scene or performance of Jonathan's? And Jonathan, what was your favorite of Matt's?
I can answer that. Sorry. My mind is blown with the performance of the polygraph test. I just think it's one of the most stunning sequences performed on TV. I think, how do you do that? There's nothing seemingly happening physically, but you know exactly what is going on, and the building pressure and everything that Hawk is as an animal is featured in that sequence. And I think it's beautiful, and you can't really compare it to anything. I think it's
very kind of you to say. We had an amazing director who I feel like did so much of that work. Right. But yeah, thank you. Thank you. I want to say thank you.
Not good with compliments. Got it.
Honestly, I mean, it's so hard for me to pick just one because Johnny was so brilliant in so many of our scenes, and just what he would bring to the table would force me into the moment and bring me right there with him. And I feel like a lot of it, and I'll just go sequentially, okay? The 50s, when you wrote, when you hung out at the party and I make you write the letter. I mean, just seeing everything his character was going through, but also having to steel myself from that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
That was the scene I was referring to.
Yes, that was it. And just the subtlety and the nuance of seeing this lost kid who was so ahead of his time. It was just all written across your face. And I loved you in the 70s.
I think a lot of people did, just saying.
Yeah, but also just the beauty of what he had brought from the 60s, because I knew what happened in the 60s, and I saw him bring that in the 70s, and it was the first time I saw you, it was a fully realized man. And it was like, whoa, it just brought me right into the scene.
Also, because with the first scene we shot in the 70s was our sort of day trip to the beach. Where
it was
we
the
talk,
beach.
and he checks in on Hawk and he's sort of studying and you come out of the sea. And I remember likewise seeing, it was unbelievably like the sort of the spiraling of Hawk was so evident, but we hadn't seen each other until we got to the beach.
Yes.
And
yeah.
So that was, I remember that.
It was
really.
another one of those scenes that you're talking about that Ron writes that's so unexpected and such a juxtaposition emotionally, because Hawk at the time is like flirting with death, trying to kill himself and see if he has the courage to swim out far enough that he can't make it back. And he pushes himself that day, and then he gets to the beach and there's the love of his life waiting for him.
Yeah.
Who like brings him back to life.
And there's also something about Tim at that point has developed the ability to sit and observe and not, be led by his emotions. And it's so interesting when the person that knows you intimately, you can't hide behind. And at that point, Hawk is just with all tension, is holding on to try some semblance of being okay. And Tim can just see, which I think is,
It's powerful.
I mean, I'm sitting up here grinning like a fool because how satisfying is it to hear them talk about these scenes that we've been watching and loving, right, for so long. It's truly amazing to hear you, kind of pick them apart in that way. All right, Nicole C. is watching.
I have to say one other scene. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, y'all.
Sorry, Nicole C.
I'm sorry. The last scene we had together in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Outside. The strength and the poignancy. You don't understand how great an actor you have to be to play Tim in that scene and not lean into the sentimentality too far, but have it be earned and just come from the soul and just come through the eyes so beautifully and in such a human way that it really was like, wow, that's like the degree of difficulty on that is unheard of, and just it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
That is Ron. That is. That really is. But also, technically in a scene like that, I remember we cross-shot that. Do you remember by that? And so basically, what you see is a live reaction because when you film a scene, sometimes. So I don't know. Sometimes it's just you film. You know what I mean? Do you know? Yeah. So we were both being filmed at the same time. Yeah. And it was silent. And usually there was something. It was like a really.
It was like a gentle snowfall.
Yeah, there was, wasn't there?
In moments, yeah.
Yeah, and there was a sequence that wasn't in the finished edit where Tim and Hawk arrive at the gala. Do you remember?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, and there was the young activists that were fighting. Oh.
Yeah.
That meant a lot to you, huh?
Yeah, but it was just they rose their fist to Tim, and I think Hawk sort of acknowledged it. But it was just I think the scene, obviously the that's that's the big operatic moment, I suppose. And I think the whole crew and everyone, there was a simplicity to it by that point because all the work's done, for Tim as well, and that's what's so. They've had their amazing, and that's the end of their amazing, beautiful sort of operatic life romance. That's it. And I think there was not much more to say, and it was clear for Tim for the first time in his life. And that's to do with that is literally to do with Ron's experience and his understanding of, his own life, I suppose, but also interpreting other people's, and that's what made it. So, I think it was. Yeah, I do think. It was so how the nerve because we didn't get episode 8 for a while,
yes.
And as we were building momentum, and you're like, oh my gosh, like you see Noah and Jelani and knowing the sort of wealth of with Alison coming in and getting a sense of that because it was so me and Matt for so long, and then you'd see bits, and you'd be like, oh my god, this is, and never doubting it, but just being so excited to see how a master can tie that all up, and it was amazing how he did it.
And there were a lot of things in flux up until the very end. Remember, there didn't used to be a milk scene, or the milk scene was very different.
Do you remember what they was? Do you remember?
Yes. Well, there were many iterations. But are you talking about the candle wax?
The candle wax.
I'm a little speechless. Woo. All right.
Anyway, we were finding these things out like a week before we do them, and so it was. But Ron had the whole thing mapped out in his mind, and he knew how to Tetris in the perfect thing to really bring the full arc of the relationship. So.
And he knew that it was the AIDS quilt that he was going to. That was his vignette. That, and I think at points, there were conversations about it could end in different ways, and he's like, that is how it ends. And I think that was one of his first images that came to his head when he considered adapting the novel. I just think it's so powerful, the zooming out and then...
Yeah, no, it brought many people to tears, I'm sure of it. Sticking on theme with different scene work, this is from Nicole C., who's watching on the live stream. Hawk's breakdown on Fire Island and the way in which Tim really takes care of him is so moving. What was each of your experience like filming that?
Well, I mean, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, No, go on, you say it.
Oh, no. No, you say it.
No, I mean, it was... I don't know why my brain goes to... I just remember... I think I'm nervous. No, it was so emotionally, it was, huge and upsetting and, Matt... It's so easy to, obviously, as Tim, look after Hawk when Matt was giving that performance, but I do remember your wig fell off a little bit.
Your wig fell off?
Your wig fell off.
Oh, it did? Oh, you put it back on.
Yeah.
So that they wouldn't lose the tears coming out of my eyes.
I know, I was like, stay in it. It's okay.
Yeah.
But it was, because it was quite, it was
Yeah,
real...
yeah, it was a handsy scene in many ways. That honestly, that was one of the more challenging things I've ever had to do in my life. It was obviously so raw emotionally, but what Destiny did that was kind of a favor to us, but was also terrifying. There was no cut between. We had to play out the whole sex scene all the way through the end of the breakdown. So there was no. It's not like they separated out the two, which was obviously kind of terrifying as a performer, but ultimately, I think all the drug-fueled, just bacchanalian desire in it, mixed with the anger and the frustration and the turn in the scene, I think she really did us all a great service in that, and that she let us play out the entirety of it.
Yeah. And that's another example of Ron's how you think the scene, it's so indulgent in the power play between the three of them, and their needs are all so explicit, and then for the picture of Jackson to be spotted, I think that was like a wild ride. But that's you're seeing sort of a Lamborghini at work there, and you just sort of all Tim has to do, you just have to listen and be there. But it was brutal.
But I did feel that. I felt everything that I felt, and that was one of those moments that we talked about in that coffee shop where you were there for me on every level, not only when we were filming, but when the cameras were in between and everything else. And it is a testament to Ron's writing, though, because it is so reflective. It's almost the same way with his alcohol intake, that you don't come for that secret he harbors or he lashes out at you, and it was kind of an echo of that. When he has a tragic secret, if you try to find it or uncover it, he attacks.
Well, we're going to finish up with two lighthearted questions from the audience. Megan would like to know, would Hawk and Skippy support Brat Summer? Megan, I love you. What a great question. That's part one.
Skippy for sure, right? He's like friends with Charlie XCX. So.
Yeah, he was at her birthday party the other day. I think that's basically what Fire Island was for them.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. Hawk likes watching the twinks enjoy Brat Summer. And other people too, but maybe.
So I think that answers who is the bigger brat.
Oh my gosh. Probably Hawk. Yeah.
I think Hawk.
Okay,
Oh,
fair.
you mean us as people? Or our characters?
I think we should go for both.
No, don't make us do that. I don't even know what Brat Summer means.
I don't either. I'm still trying to figure it out. There's a dance on TikTok. I know that.
Yeah, I like
We'll learn
that.
it and we'll do it and we'll post it. Okay. Last question. And this is, I guess, a lot of people asked it, so many names on this. Lots of milk questions. Jack and Jonathan. Jonathan, how much milk did you drink? What kind was it?
It's oat milk for me. I drank probably about 17 litres. No. Do you know what? We did that really quickly.
We did.
It was like
the end of the night.
a take and a half. Yeah. After about 20 hours. No, 17-hour day.
Yeah, it was a long one.
I remember at the beginning of that game, knowing that scene that was at the end of the day, and you look down at the call sheet, and we're like, we've done one scene, and weve got 7 to go, and it's like it was literally 2 a.m.
Yeah.
I mean, it was but yeah. So actually, not that much milk, but it was for me. It was oat.
Okay.
Did you mind that
And a
when you
great
licked it off my chin?
opportunity to talk about your charity if you want to.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah,
She's a great audience to talk to.
Well, it is.
Please
Yeah, I mean,
tell us
it's
about it.
amazing. Yeah.
Beautiful thing that Jonathan did that parlayed some of the work and awareness we did on the show and turned it into something much bigger and a great way to give back to the community.
Yeah, well, I do think that's something that was totally inspired by, obviously inspired by fellow travelers, but just the experience of telling the story. And yeah, I mean, the T-shirt sold out straight away, but I think that's because of Matt's command.
Well, the name of the organization is
the Shameless Fund.
and we can look online
Yeah, we can, and it's gonna, it will. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited. It feels like a sort of a really interesting way of being able to support multiple charities as we go forward. And 2025 will be the year where we can start, identifying the grants. But there's amazing ways in doing things because it's kind of overwhelming. I think when you get asked to get involved with different charities, and I just sort of felt, obviously, wanted to. There's so many brilliant causes out there, and so wanted to come up with a way that you could disperse and also raise the profile of non-profits, and because how else do you? It's the sense of overwhelm, isn't there, with charities? And anyway, Shameless Fund will be a way that you can support those by hopefully buying some vibey stuff along the way. Yeah.
Well, good on you. You guys. This has been one of the most gratifying interviews I've gotten to do in my career. I love when I get to highlight work that actually says something, and that means so much to so many people. And to talk to 2 trailblazers in the community going out there and fighting the good fight through art, because I think nothing is more powerful than that. And I know this whole room is grateful for your gifts and your artistry. I'm so grateful for it. And I think my friend Celeste is backstage. I want to celebrate the night and kick it off with a little glass of oat milk. Yeah, baby. The other character in the series. So grab a cup.
Oh my God. Thank you.
To these 2 gentlemen, thank you for a beautiful night.
Thank you, Tommy.
Thank you.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.
And we have one more clip we're going to play on our way out. So sit, enjoy the clip, and we're going to go enjoy some oat milk.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. It means so much to us. Tommy, thank you so much for this Q&A and hosting. We love you. Thank you so much.